I'm an 80s kid, therefore I speak from experience here on superhero cartoons from that decade. Welcome to my channel, KC. That's me, Carrie Chug, the Sledge Storyteller. If you like this video, please click like. If you like this channel, please click subscribe. And while you're at it, make one more click on the notification button. Thank you. Now, there was no avoiding the vetting process over what qualifies a character as a superhero when it comes to this decade, at least to me. And I don't doubt that there will be those who disagree with my criteria, but it's my channel, and if you disagree, feel free to rebut in the comment section. Feel free to make your own video, and I'd love to see the differing opinion, the insight. But here are the rules. No teams of robots, no sword and sorcery, no special paramilitary forces, and no anthropomorphic animals.
These are the Super Friends.
So yes, this is Hanna-Barbera's iteration of the Justice League. It kept going into the 80s, but 1980, they added just 8 more episodes that were each made of 3 mini-episodes. And there was one episode that brought back Bizarro as the villain, and in recognizing that just 8 episodes can't fill a whole season, they mixed in episodes from previous seasons. 1981, just 6 episodes, also mixing in episodes from previous seasons, thematically the same as the previous season. They had an episode where Nick mixes Pitlick. He comes with a filmmaker's flair form of nuisance. Though not General Zod, a Kryptonian villain from the Phantom Zone, and another Bizarro episode, and a lot of invasions by kaiju-like monsters. But it was all reruns the next year until 1983, where they face a reunited Legion of Doom, also with Superman versus another 3 villains who escaped the Phantom Zone. And the end of this season also marked the end of segments with PSAs, code words, arts and crafts, and magic tricks. But most people familiar with the Super Friends agree that the 1984 season was a big turning point for the series. For one thing, the episodes began to be more sophisticated, knowing that the audience had matured at that point. Here, Hanna-Barbera made a joint venture with Kenner Toys to put it all under the Superpowers label. But the standout factor was that Olin Soule had ceased voicing Batman and took on voiceover duties for Professor Martin Stein, the intellectual half of the newcomer Firestorm, with Ronnie Redmond as the hands-on voiced by Mark Taylor. He performed the physical aspects of it. So who took over for the voice of Batman? And who else but Adam West? And I was all for that change, with a nostalgia factor, having my gateway Batman doing the work with a deeper, more commanding voice.
First, we have to find out which star they're heading for.
Also, Constance Caulfield replaced Shannon Farnan as Wonder Woman, and another newcomer to the series roster, Cyborg. He was voiced by, that same year, Ghostbuster, Ernie Hudson, as well as Brainiac. After years of this, was redesigned to look like this. What raised the stakes more was the addition of Darkseid and his minions from Apocalypse as villains, bringing new global threats every time. The final season changed the series title one more time to Superpowers Galactic Guardians, and here it brought more major threats from Darkseid. No voices changed other than casting B.J. Ward, maybe better known for voicing Scarlet on G.I. Joe to voice Wonder Woman. And here we get the one Joker episode in the series, though extremely low-key, to depict the mystery leader of the Royal Flush Gang under Darkseid's direction. Penguin also makes his only appearance in this series in an episode where he steals Superman's powers. And there's another episode where Superman dies, and as you would expect, he is brought back to life. But if you ask anybody familiar with this last season, what is the standout episode, they will say The Fear. Earlier seasons of the series had depicted origin stories of Superman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, and even Apache Chief once, but censorship guidelines made Batman's origin essentially untouchable, given the violent nature of it. And of course, in this episode, they managed to leave out any gun imagery and any gunfire sound, and it's simply done.
Pardon me?
Keep your hands off my wife!
Look out! He's got him!
But this episode not only shed some light on his parents' murder, but showed snippets of his development into the ultimate detective and crime fighter, emphasizing one of the most crucial factors in Batman's characterization, that he's a product of his own hard work, and also makes good use of the Scarecrow as the villain, though strange that it steals Daredevil's most famous moniker.
And so I became Batman, the man with no fear.
Not too hard for me to look past, and yes, that's my favorite episode in the whole series. So with the momentum of the theme being about DC, I'm jumping ahead to near the end of the decade before pulling back to the early 80s for other properties later on. In 1988, the Ruby Spears Animation Studio gave us Superman, and amazingly, they were allowed to use the movie Superman theme, originally composed by John Williams. And it showed bits from the Superman Family album at the end of the series, kind of like the PSAs in other cartoons, where young Clark Kent learns a life lesson. But back in the day, I think I caught maybe 4 episodes because it aired at 6 a.m. my time. It was Mountain Standard Time, and only on CBS, which tells me they didn't have much faith in this property. But it was okay. The character design was more vivid than was in Super Friends, and it was well animated. It just kind of dragged at times.
Spider-Man and his amazing friend.
Rewinding back to 1981 now, I had watched enough of the 60s Spider-Man cartoons mentioned in a previous video that my appetite for Spidey had kind of been satiated, but Iceman grabbed my attention not only with the ice chrome look, but the whole notion of ice forming powers that you could make your own roller coaster with. Decades later, it hit me. How is an ice structure like that going to stay in place like 500 feet from where it's originally planted? You just don't think about that kind of thing when your age is in the single digits. But the show Team Spidey with Iceman and Firestar, and she was created just for the series, but she was popular enough to be made part of the Marvel comic book universe. Each member of the team got an origin story spotlight. In the case of Iceman and Firestar, they were born with it, and it was all about how they learned to live with their powers. Spider-Man told the classic tale of the radioactive spider bite, going into the show business, learning the hard way. With great power comes great responsibility. And I'll give the episode credit that much of the dialogue was taken directly from the original comic story. There are a lot of fun episodes with such villains as Dr. Doom, Magneto, Green Goblin, Chameleon, Electro, and the Red Skull. Also some guest appearance from many other Marvel superheroes, most notably the X-Men. So it was a fun adventure to watch and a great way to become more familiar with the Marvel Universe if you weren't reading the comics. Now, this cartoon was grouped with Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends as kind of a Marvel Power Hour. After years of primary exposure to the Hulk from the live-action TV show with Lou Ferrigno, here's how I learned about the comic book origin with the Incident Gamma Ray test site blasting Bruce Banner with gamma rays. And yeah, it was this series that clarified to me that Dr. Banner's first name was supposed to be Bruce in the comics. I also learned about love interest Betty Ross, her dad, General Thunderbolt Ross, Major Talbot, and Rick Jones. It was a little weird when Hulk changed back into Bruce Banner, and all his torn clothes would be restored to their original form. I presume that was to avoid having to deal with the process of getting him back into a new set of clothes within the allotted time. But looking past that, we get great episodes with such villains as the Leader and the Hydra Organization, with other menaces on the form of a corrosive blob and a sentient computer-made Cyclops. There's also a cameo, other hero appearance from the She-Hulk. I love how the action was portrayed, making the full use of the Hulk's MO. It's also dived deep into Bruce's psyche, where his desperation to escape his curse weighs down on him heavily. We're talking top-tier 80s kids show pathos.
Spider-Man!
Also airing on NBC during the same series run period as Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. Here's the deal. It wasn't until about 2004 when I saw an episode of this series come up on what I believe was Cartoon Network that I had any idea that this cartoon ever even existed. Apparently my NBC market said no to it, or maybe licensing was an issue. But when I first saw this episode, I was initially confused over recognizing the animation style, same background music, only to hear a different voiceover for Spider-Man than Dan Gilvison on Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. In this case, the voice was Ted Schwartz. I finally made the deep dive into Disney Plus watching this series. Much the same flavor, featuring the same villains, and apparently it just didn't want to be hamstrung to the continuity of Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends and vice versa.
Defenders of the Earth! Defenders!
So Marvel Entertainment picked up licensing from King Features, who have been behind many newspaper strips. Among them were Flash Gordon, The Phantom, Mandrake the Magician with his assistant Lothar, who were joined together in the cartoon Defenders of the Earth. But also these adventures included Flash Gordon's son Rick, Lothar's son LJ, the Phantom's daughter Jetta, and Mandrake's apprentice Kshin. And yes, the relationships often were the framework for morality lessons. Plots pitted them against such villains as longtime Flash Gordon heavy Ming the Merciless, Kurt Walker, the older brother of the Phantom, the Sky Band, a group of raiders originally depicted in the Phantom comics, here essentially space pirates, Queen Hadia, ruler of the subterranean netherworld, and lastly Graviton is an extra-dimensional villain whose origin remains a mystery. Pretty good cartoon, I'd say on the late 80s curve, the silver standard. Okay, time to dip into the bizarre. By this point, Filmation had made superhero cartoons of many heroes of the DC universe, along with some characters they had come up with on their own. This show portrayed both, and started with a live-action interactive comedy show between supposed to be high school age superheroes, Captain California, a surfer who could sky surf with a sentient surfboard he named Wipeout. When he smiled, his teeth were capable of reflecting powerful and destructive rays. How? I have no idea. Then there's Glorious Gal. She has superhuman strength and durability, flight, mental telepathy, and clairvoyance. So definitely the most powerful member of the group, and they were, even though they kind of portrayed her as the dainty type. Misty Magic. She's a magician, and her uncle is the chief of police who constantly voices his disapproval of the hero's intervention in crime fighting. Weatherman. Yeah, he controls the weather and flies by the aid of the transport by a cloud. Rex Ruthless. He borders on being a villain. He gets himself into trouble and causes problems for the team's efforts, and unclear just what power, ability, or weaponry he had, and it seems like he just mooches off of love interest Dirty Trixie, who has all kinds of gadgets in the form of such compounds as sneezing power. Punk rock. It's the rock star shtick, using his guitar in ways ranging from generating earthquakes to simulating a power siren. There would be a live audience of children attending the live-action stage wraparounds with music and a slew of dad jokes. If both Wikipedia and IMDb are correct, the series was made after a rights dispute caused the deal to air a superhero version of Archie. It fell through. It's not hard to see parallels between Archie and Captain California, Betty and Glorious Gal, Rex, Ruthless, and Jughead, and Veronica and Dirty Trixie. But okay, let's talk about the Shazam segments to this show. It's pretty obvious that it springboarded off of Filmation's previous live-action Shazam series. I mean, it did use the same music theme. It featured then Captain Marvel, and I can't help but think that this is how Filmation wished they could make the live-action series, with its use of Captain Marvel's Rogues Gallery from comics such as Dr. Savannah, Mr. Mind, and Black Adam, as well as other heroes that were in the story: Captain Marvel Jr., Mary Marvel, Taki Tani, and Uncle Dudley. Obviously, they would not have the budget to depict special effects that would justify that. It was something of a dial down of the campiness of Hero High, but still some cornball humor at play. The heroes are effectively portrayed that you root for them, and the stories were fun enough. It wouldn't have been worth watching through if not for the fact that I was waiting for Shazam to air.
Great star.
Sticking with Filmation here. So Filmation had major success with He-Man and She-Ra. And again, not featured here as 80 superheroes per my criteria. But when He-Man well ran dry, they went simultaneously to a Western sci-fi genre. and only the planet New Texas, a world only vaguely given any kind of background. It's set in the 23rd century. Maybe call it MacGuffin. It's cerium. It's a red-colored mineral and is what everyone with any power wanted as a fuel source to use, in the case of the villain Tex-Hex, to monopolize and oppress the people of New Texas. Can anyone save them?
And one day a lawman appeared with powers of hawk, wolf, puma, and bear.
So yeah, Bravestar is a benevolent Native American lawman that pulls from the kind of tradition seen among Navajo peoples where we get the term skinwalkers, where people morph into animals or take on animal characteristics. And here, Bravestar just needs to express the incantations.
Ears of the wolf. Speed of the puma. Strength of the bear.
Now, I love animals and their symbolism for various strengths. I mean, I listed animal morphing on my top 10 superpowers video, that being a few years ago. And also a few years ago, it was in my Power Spotlight series. I make no bones over the fact that I remember those factors in the series when trying to figure out the name for my own character concept. Initially he was Brock. Initially putting together the portmanteau of bear and hawk, wanted to emphasize that he had a high level of strength and that he could fly. So while the premise is awesome, the delivery is decent. The series often created situations where Bravestar has to use his powers in a clever fashion, and it's rarely as a ready situation where he calls upon one of those powers and that solves the whole problem. It just does tend to keep things at the juvenile level. His horse 3030, I'd rather that they'd not featured him, have a horse, but not like this, where he shifts to human form to fight like that. A little bit goofy. And I'll give it credit for playing an anti-drug based episode in a gutsy fashion, where a teenage kid actually dies because of his drug use. Of course, that discreetly showed only his hand as Bravestar finds him and feels for a pulse. Since this was the 80s, I never would have imagined that they could even go that far. It ran for one season from 87 to Filmation's shutdown in 88. So barely fits the criteria, so I'll feature Inspector Gadget, which started in 1983 under Deke Entertainment. Perhaps inspired by the $6 Million Man, Gadget is a cyborg detective whose mission is to foil criminal efforts of the organization MAD, helmed by the never-seen, at least in the cartoon, Dr. Claw. He's well equipped with arms that extend, legs that spring, and a built-in helicopter, my personal favorite, that came out of his hat, an extra hand, binoculars, whatever he felt he needed. Of course, often he would make the command as to which device should come out, and yes, the wrong one would often come out, perhaps to magnify the fact that he was a dimwit. At times, his efforts would make some side progress for the case he was working on, but it would be his niece Penny with her portable computer book and wristwatch, and somehow she was much smarter with better tactics that her inept uncle with her sidekick dog Brain that would be the prime mover in solving the case. It is what it is, and it's both fun and funny, if it's not goofy.
Frankie, Howler, and Drax Jr., the Drac Pack.
So now back to Hanna-Barbera. From their Australian division in 1980, the timing for its airing was perfect for me. This was after my last Halloween as Dracula, and to make him and the core Universal monsters into heroes. Under the direction of Dracula, more frequently referred to as Big D, Drac Jr. leads the trio of humans with Frankie and Howler all morphing into superhero monsters at war with the organization Ogre. More on them later, but Drac Jr., a vampire who beyond bats can morph into any animal, mist, or device that can move the plot, and also has telekinesis. Frankie, of course, becomes Frankenstein's monster. There's a Hulk factor to him in that anger functions as a power-up, and what was fun with him is how often the pack would be trapped in a type of prison, whether it was set by villains or just chaotically created, But Drac and Howler would point out all the stakes they're up against and remind him how mad it would make him, thus inducing a temper tantrum so he can break them all out. Howler, the werewolf, could be all kinds of things werewolf lore, leaping, biting, pouncing, but his unique ability lines up with the big bad wolf of Three Little Pigs lore, having super windy breath. But you got the villain, gang, ogre. It's the Organization of Generally Rotten Enterprises, and love that acronym. But you've got Dr. Dread, the one-dimensional leader, Fly, he's a fly, Toad, a little bit more to him, with a Peter Lorre persona to him, and Mummy Man, who's basically the muscle, and he can use his bandages to lasso the good guys. And Vampira, basically all the same powers as Drac, who she generally tries to seduce. As a Halloween monster superhero comedy, it works with a lot of funny angles. While villain characterization is pretty thin, their schemes make every episode interesting, and a car that converts into a jet and a speedboat. I tell you, when I first saw those conversions, suddenly I had expectations for what every hero's vehicle should do. But that's my spotlight on the superhero cartoons of the 80s. Agree, disagree, something I left out? Please let me know in the comment section. And still got my Kickstarter going to get Sledge number 4 off the ground. There's a link to that campaign in the description below. Have a look. But let's all look for civility amid all the bad news out there about social and political strife. Let's not hate, and let's see everybody we meet as a potential friend. Everyone be safe, and God bless.